Right, so today we're gonna be revisiting the neutral 2v1 situation, specifically the bracket attack. And adding something that I noticed in a practice run last Sunday. I'm gonna show you a few tech view files in a second. Just to get back to the basics, of course, for an effective and efficient 2v1 engagement, we want to start in a good formation as an element. As in all cases, a good element formation gives us a good 360-degree scan, which helps us detect the bandit as early as possible. Usually, whoever detects the bandit first gets more time to maneuver before the engagement and gain the superior position, and gain as many advantages as possible before the merge. We want to have, of course, energy if we can. We want to have surprise if we can. All the advantages are going to help us win the fight and not get killed in the process. And correct spacing and positioning gives us good geometry for turns, for formation turns, and all kinds of maneuvering, right? So when we are, of course, all these tactics we practice when these preset turns that we do when we engage a bandit. They all work in a more or less co-energy situation. If there's a huge energy difference, then of course you're going to use energy tactics, boom and zoom, and those kinds of tactics. Even if you have a superior turning plane, if you have the extra energy, you're going to be better suited with energy tactics. But if you're co-energy, then you get to use. Then you're able to use these to maximize the performance of your plane, and make use of your numbers advantage. Take advantage of that and cash in that advantage. So this is still dangerous, even if you have the numbers advantage here. A 2v1 is still dangerous. You can still get killed in the first merge. We're gonna see later how you pretty much cannot avoid the one merge head to head. So that's still dangerous. You can choose to just avoid the fight and come back with more advantages by just blasting through, avoiding the head-on and just going through. Or you can decide to fight the bandit with you should still have pretty good chances in a 2v1, but it depends on the aircraft you're flying, how good is your bandit, of course, and other factors may be involved. All right, so the basic tactic for this is the bracket attack, which are also called offensive split, where both fighters increase their separation in order to force the bandit to choose one of them, and by doing that, giving the other one the turning room needed to get on his 6, right? So that's where the lead turn comes in. If we just let's forget about this guy above here. Let's imagine this was a 1v1, and here we have the fighter doing a lead turn as was described in the video I told you guys to see. He turns away from the head-on to create turning room to try and turn behind the bandit, right? Of course, the counter to that intention of doing a lead turn is to close that turning room, to negate that turning room and force a head-on pass, right? So this fighter, even though he tries to do his best to do a lead turn, if the bandit doesn't want to give him the turning room, he's fucked. I mean, he cannot get it unless he's just blind or something. But by doing that, he gives the turning room to this other guy, right? So what he could do, he could just fly through both of them, but then both of them would have some turning room. And the main thing here is whichever is your position, you need to be constantly judging your separation, your flight path separation with the bandit, and adjusting it to gain the optimal flight path separation to begin an early lead turn that will give you as close as possible to 180 degrees of angle advantage. That means you should try to get on his 6 within guns range, if at all possible, right? And for that, you need enough separation. The flight separation needs to be 1 turn diameter or 2 turn radius, right? That gives you enough turning room to get on his 6. Of course, you need to get the timing right, because if you don't, you might get on his 6, but maybe 600 meters behind, and that's not really useful. So you need to time it right, so you get on his 6 at the right moment. And if we see, as soon as we see the bandit is turning away, then we need to start closing that distance immediately, because you may end up too far behind. So that's the main thing here. When we bracket, we separate from the projected flight path of the bandit. We want to be constantly adjusting our separation, so we make a good lead turn and end up on his 6. All right. And this guy, as soon as he sees he's coming in for him, he must maneuver in such a way to avoid the head-on, not get killed in the process, and try to create a reversal situation, because this guy is still fighting a 1v1 here. Of course, he's just buying time to let his friend get the kill, but he needs to fight well still. he can't just fall asleep and expect win by himself. So yeah, does it make sense, the whole lead turn thing?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So there's a few things that can happen here. Of course, the bandit, if he knows this deal, he can choose to pass through, as we said before, to blow through. In that case, we want to make our turns not too hard, so we don't lose all our speed, because then we might end up on his 6, but he's faster than we, and he just flies away. So how hard we turn is also something we need to be constantly adjusting and evaluating. Also, of course, flight, the aircraft performance plays a role. Better turning aircraft can need less turning room to get an effective lead turn. So whatever flight path separation there is going to benefit more a good turning aircraft than a worse turning aircraft. Right. So that's something to keep in mind. And he could also, of course, the counter to this maneuver, the bracket, is to try to be on the outside. In this case, if we see the wingman is a bit further behind number 1, if I was a bandit here, I would turn harder, try to come from the right side and pass both fighters in a minimal flight path separation situation. I would try to deny this fighter his turning room, but also this fighter here. And the way to do this is to approach from the side of the formation. Do not surround me. Does it make sense? So that's also something to keep in mind when you bracket. You need to be sure to surround the bandit and have one fighter on each side of him. Because if he manages to be on the outside, then he just passes. He just gets 2 head-ons, and if he's desperate, he might take them both, and he might get lucky and shoot you and shoot the both fighters, or at least damage them. So that's something to avoid. All right.
Something I want to mention is good SA coming into this situation is pretty good, or pretty important. Like at one point, Swamp and I were relatively recently we were coming in against a singleton, and I had a problem identifying it, and it turned in. We thought it was a 2v1, and it very quickly turned into a 2v2. And so even if you make a perfect pass on a 2,
I think.
Yeah, well, it eventually turned into a 3v2. But yeah, it's one of those things where it was fine as a 2v1, but then as soon as the second bandit just came out of nowhere, it was all bets were off. We were already committed, so.
It's always the one you don't see.
Yeah, yeah. Keep that in mind always. There's another. Yeah, that's a good point. And the thing is, part of these tactics is to maintain. I mean, at no point in this maneuver, you lose your mutual support, visual mutual visual support, right? So you're still. This guy is looking at the bandit, but he still sees his friend there, and he is looking at both of them. You're still covering each other's sixes at all times, right? And of course, this is just the opening maneuver. Then from here, the fight goes on, and it should be quick if you're doing everything right. It should end quick. Um, but of course, if the bandit is a good defender, then he is gonna stay alive maybe a longer time. And the more time you spend trying to kill him, the more time you are vulnerable because your eyes are on the attack, or your attention is on the attack, uh, and less on the defense. So of course, it's always good to have a second element, covering you from more bandits or whatever. But yeah, you should keep, and that goes for all double attack maneuvers, right? For the doctrine in general, the double attack doctrine is to keep looking at your wingman the whole time during the fight, right? Every now and then, and be ready to disengage if you need to.
I'm very new, but I'm just going to jump in. That's a good segue. Another thing that we harped on when we do a lot of this stuff, like purge setups and stuff, is good communication. So I don't know if that's what you'll do.
We try.
Yeah, definitely. In our case, we a big difference from more modern fighting is that we have limited comms with regards that there's sometimes 12, 16, sometimes there's two squadrons in the same channel. So we don't have the luxury of communicating everything like they do in modern fighter context. So we need to really know what needs to be said, what absolutely needs to be said, and what can just visual cues to replace standard communications. Right. But definitely the communication is a big deal. I mean, there's some things
We have
you
a whole
cannot-
lesson unit on comms.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to kind of give an example, like communication, but very short and concise. Like one's engaged, two's free. Just simple things like that to know where you're at, where you need to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's in this case, for example, the leader would call, or the leader would call bracket. As always in the double attack, if the leader doesn't see the bandit and the wingman does, and it's time to react like now, the wingman can also call the maneuver. It's better than trying to guide the leader's eyes onto the bandit when you're already merged. Then it's already too late. So if needed, the wingman to call it, bracket. Whoever's sure he's getting engaged by the bandit should maybe call it, although both fighters probably gonna be able to see that. And then the main thing you want to call here, if you are engaged here, is to tell this guy when he's free. If he's getting outturned by the bandit or something, if he goes defensive, which hopefully doesn't happen because he's in a neutral situation here. But if this develops to a defensive situation for the fighter, then he should always call when the bandit is off him, when he's free to come back in, so he doesn't just disengage from the fight entirely and leaves him alone fighting the bandit. This is one of the most important calls that you need to make. Because he might not be able. At some point he just doesn't see a bandit on his six anymore, but he's not sure that he's not there. He just doesn't see him. So you need to tell him, right? He turned away from you. He turned to the right or something, or call his turn. He's off. Turn right, or climb, or whatever maneuver is appropriate for the situation, so he can get back and help you here. That I would say is one of the most important calls in such a fight. Alright, so there's a few variants of brackets. You can do brackets in the horizontal plane, which is like standard one, but there's usually some vertical element is usually useful. It makes it more difficult for the bandit to spot at least one of them. He might not even see one of the fighters, which of course is great. And it may also allow you to better use your plane's performance. If you have a good climbing plane or whatever, you can adjust. You can use the vertical to adjust your speed for the optimal turning speed, or use your climb rate or other things to increase your advantage. And of course, if the band is coming from a slight angle, or there's slightly, there's slight differences in your formation, all of that is going to affect your specific geometry for the engagement. But you all can eyeball that and adjust. And the 2v2 is the same thing. It's just you want to fight one of them first, and then go for the other. You want to try to force them both to turn away from each other, so you can fight one, kill him quickly, and then go for the other one, instead of having two separate 1v1s. Right? But we're not going to do this today, I think. We might, but we'll see. So the exercise is going to be, well, we're still going to be watching an example, but the exercise is going to be to set up in the training server in the dual areas. Two fighters on one side, one fighter on the other side. You can use your campaign planes if you want to continue practicing on them, or otherwise you can just choose whatever planes you want. And you want to practice. Now, as I said before, this tactic is about the opening. It's the opening maneuver, right? So from here, what we want to see is one of the fighters neutral, and the other one of the fighters should be offensive. If they both get an offensive position, the bogey fucked up, and it's great for them. But if the bogey does his job well, he should get at least one of them neutral. If he does his job really well, he gets a neutral pass on both of them. But that means the fighters fucked up somewhere, right? And if the bogey decides to blast through, they both should convert to a 6 o'clock position. And if you manage your energy right, you should be able to stay, or at least have a short window of opportunity to shoot. If the bandit is faster, that window might be shorter. If you time it right, you're still going to have at least a chance of shooting it down.
Is the goal
User was moved to your channel.
Is the goal of the engaged fighter to sort of kind of set up a drag at that point, just instead of trying to reverse, just keep going?
What you do after this depends on your relative aircraft performance mainly. If assuming you're co-energy, you want to do the best plan for as if this was a 1v1. So if you have a better turning plane, you want to do, for example, a nose to tail turn here and try to get on E6. If you have a better, I don't know, you might be better suited with a nose to nose turn, or maybe a scissors or whatever you would use in a 1v1. You want to use it here, because you also want to be offensive if you can. If you can turn this neutral merge into an offensive one and have two fighters offensive on one bogey, then that's great. Of course, they should not be together on the going for the control zone of the bandit, right? On his 6, because they can crash. But if he manages to go offensive, then he can be supporting, or he can go to a supporting position while he goes offensive. And that's of course much better than just staying neutral while he goes offensive alone. But if your plane sucks, a drag is of course the best option here. You can just blast through here instead of turning with this guy. If he's turning with you, you can just dive away slightly, and he will follow you, and then set up a perfect drag for number 3 for the other fighter here. Just be aware that in which direction you're dragging. You don't want to drag directly away from him, because you're going to get away faster than he gets closer, right? He needs to time it very, very well, but even if he does, if you turn away and run away, then you're going to be dragging the bogey away from your friend. And you don't want to drag him right into your friend, because then you're gonna have another head-on pass. You're gonna give him the turning room so he can get on the bandit 6 and get it quickly, right?
I do have one more question.
Yep.
So, and this may not even be pertinent to the exercise tonight, but just in general. So, we talked about if the bandit just stays straight to try to reset the fight. What if he dives away?
What is he stay straight?
Well, no, I'm saying like essentially he's going for essentially like a reset to regain advantages. What if he dives away?
If he dives away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if he is still in this situation, since it's a head-on, any turning you need to do, if he doesn't turn at all, and you turn, then you are gonna probably end up slower than him, unless you have a much higher performance aircraft, right? So if he just blasts through, as I said before, you might have a short window of opportunity to shoot him. If he dives through and below, then you can do a diving turn and maybe you catch him, but it will depend on your performance, on your diving performance. If you have a better dive performance, you might catch him. If you don't, then he's gonna be away. And that's not much. There's not much you can do about that, because just the situation is not, this is not a guaranteed kill for the two fighters for the element. Only if the bogey decides to engage. But in a context, in the context of the
Oh no, I was just gonna say, the reason why I asked, I just didn't know if we were supposed to give chase, which I mean, like you said, it's very dependent upon your aircraft's performance.
Yeah. For this exercise, we want the bandit to engage, of course, because if he doesn't engage, then there's no exercise, right? So for this exercise, and in any case, in a context in a campaign context, if the bandit if you force him to dive away, then you still won the fight. You have the control of the area anyway. So,
very true.
Yeah. So that's the exercise, and this is an example. As you can see here, this is a bit quick. Let me slow it down a bit. So we have both fighters in a pretty good spread here. 500 meters is a good spread for this situation. As we said before, you want to have enough room. If he goes for this guy, we have a full turn circle here, and that's enough room to get a 180-degree advantage here on the merge, right? So he separates. He sees he's coming this way. He continues going that way to force him to turn to the outside. Because if I go head on right here, then he's going to be able to envelop the element, and that's not good. So he starts the fight when he's already committed. When there's no time for him to switch, he starts turning again into the bandit, and with some vertical element to avoid the guns. You want to turn out of plane. If you turn in plane, it's very easy for the bandit to get a lucky hit on you. And this guy sees him turning away from him. He sees he's turning towards his friend, so he immediately starts turning. And you can see he doesn't wait for the merge. He starts turning into the bandit as soon as he recognizes he has enough turning room to do that, right?
Yeah, I feel like I always wait far too long to make that first turn when I'm in a supporting position.
Yeah, that's usually one of the most common mistakes. And as you can see here, even if they did it quite well, the separation here is still quite big. Here's pretty much the same. It's almost 500 meters here. So ideally, we want to be right here when we finish the maneuver, right? But since he's still turning, then the fighter still gets the chance to shoot. But this timing is very important. As you can see here, this guy tried to go for a scissors, and he did it really bad, and he's putting himself in danger here. So remember, you're not forced to do this. If you can imagine him just continue straight here, that's a perfect drag. So that's something to keep in mind. There's no rush to get on a no reason to take risks to go offensive here when you can play it safe.
Well, yeah. If your wingman's in a good position as well, like creating scissors can make it a harder shot for them. and delay the fight.
Yeah. There's another example here. Here, that's you see the bandit coming from the right side, so they do a attack turn just before the merge. This I like showing this because this is the example of why attack turns are not just administrative turns. They are useful in combat. Here the separation is much higher. We have more than 1 kilometer of separation, which is not ideal. The good thing about this is that the bandit probably didn't see this guy, or maybe he just assumed he was no factor. But as you can see here, the separation is still too big with the bandit. But then that ends up working all right. The geometry of the turns end up helping the fighter to get in a good position. But as you can see, the other fighter just you can see what he does after the merge here. He just continues straight, right? He avoids the head-on. He just drags him. There's no intention of turning in a scissors or whatever. He just continues straight, and it's a perfect drag for the wingman. Right.
Based on how the red plane maneuvered there, or didn't, I suspect he didn't see him at all.
Yeah, so that's the advantage of larger separation. It's very likely that he won't see one of them. But on the other hand, when you have a large group of aircraft, well, that's always pros and cons about that. You just need to make sure you're going to be able to six the bandit before he sixes your friend, right? So if he has enough turning room to put a lead turn on him and threaten him, then you want to be closer to shoot him down quickly, right? And let me show you quickly. I'm going to switch.
If I was the blue aggressor there, I might have actually been cutting the corner to try and close the distance a little bit quicker.
Yeah. So this example, do you see the tag view here? Is my tag view screen visible?
Yep, we can see it.
No.
No.
You're streaming
I just
the
see a
application.
screenshot.
You're not streaming the application. You're streaming.
Oh, just the PowerPoint.
What can
Yes.
Tips see then?
No,
Just seeing
it's
his
on the
frozen
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
He has a secret camera in Princess's room.
There should be there.
Yep, we got it.
So this is last Sunday we're practicing. So this is an example of how a good lead turn should look like. Here the bandit goes like in between and climbs, and the fighter is right. You can see the distance. That's what we're looking for. I mean, ideally, we want to get this after the merge. We already in a guns position before he even gets to go for the other guy. Now, from this guy's point of view, I think he should be much more aggressive because, as you can see, he waits until this point to start turning. So he's really not very he's not putting any pressure on the bandit. And if I fuck up here, if I don't get the shot or whatever, then the bandit's much better positioned than the fighter here down here for continuing the fight. So both aircraft should be aggressive and start turning as soon as they. As you can see, both aircraft here have the turning room to do the same thing. So they should definitely. All right. So yeah, that's it. Something to just to make sure we're making the most of our time. As you can see here, this is the bracket, and that's all it is. The bracket's over here, and from this point onwards, it's just a dogfight. And this is not really the objective of tonight's training. So, and this can take really long. So I suggest, of course, you can do whatever you want, but I suggest you guys focus on the initial merge. Get to this position. Try to do your own like short debrief among you. Like, did it work? Didn't it work? Why didn't it? Why? Or whatever, and then start again and do it again and again and again. So many reps, as many reps as you can, because this is the main part, right?